I start off the introduction of the book with what I call a religious fast. A religious fast is basically a story from the Bible, but it has bits and pieces added to it just to present it in a humorous way. However, it has a main message in it. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. So this story would be the story of the flood with Noah building the ark. And look how it's presented here. It says God told Noah, in 6 months, I'm going to make it rain and cover the whole earth with water. It gives Noah the instruction, take two of every animal, put them in the ark. Now it says here, 6 months passed. Noah shouted the Lord, where is my ark? Lord, please forgive me, begged Noah. I did my best, but there were some big problems. And he goes on to list the problems he had, why he couldn't build the ark. He says, first, I had to get a building permit for the ark construction, but your plans did not meet their code. Okay, so here's Noah. God told him to build an ark, and he attempts to build the ark, but he needed a permit, but they don't approve it because God's plans did not meet the code of the department. Then I had a big problem getting enough wood for the ark. Why? Because there was a ban on cutting trees to save the spotted owls. I tried to convince the environmentalists and the Department of Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's another problem he had there. And again, he lists another problem here. Next, I started gathering up the animals, and he was sued by the animal rights group that objected to him taking along two of each kind. Now, I'll just go to the last portion there. With that, the sky cleared, the sun began to shine, and a rainbow across the sky. Noah looked up and smiled. You mean you're not going to destroy the world? He asked hopefully. No, said the Lord. And this is key. The government already has. So this is what I mean by religious fast. The story comes from the Bible, but we have bits and pieces added to make it humorous, but at the same time to put out a very concrete message. And the message here is this: God's purposes for the earth are obstructed or hindered when the government on earth are not aligned with his will. And this is why in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus said this, right? He said, thy kingdom come. He says, God, your government come so that your will be done. Unless God's government is fully operational on this earth, God's will is obstructed. Jesus, at one point, asked his disciples, who do you think I am? And some say you're a prophet, teacher. Some say you're John the Baptist reincarnated. Some say you're Elijah, Jeremiah. They put all sorts of labels on him. But Peter answered correctly. He said, you are the Christ. And the Christ means that anointed king. And Jesus says, flesh and blood have not revealed this, but my Father which is in heaven. He did a lot of things that were deemed religious, but he was also proclaiming a government, a kingdom. The church itself is supposed to be God's government agency on this earth. In other words, when God looks down on the earth, his government is the church. Now let's go back to Genesis to prove that. In the book of Genesis, God created the earth and gave dominion over all the earth to Adam and Eve. They were just people that God created, and he says, you rule, have dominion over the earth, govern. The word dominion means to govern the earth. But who were Adam and Eve? They were a people that were submitted to God. And what we call the fall of man was because they disobeyed God. So which people are qualified to govern the earth? Is it a people who are submitted to God's will, or a people who have strayed away from God's will? And that's to back up the point that I made earlier, that the church are a people who are redeemed, a people who are the true church I'm talking about, who are submitted to the Lord, who wants to see his will fulfilled on earth. And therefore, as far as God is concerned, these are the legitimate people to govern the earth. And so the church becomes God's government agency on this earth. Worldly governments are simply, it's just still the race of Adam that is still trying to hold and control the earth. But God has raised a new people under Christ, and those are the people that he can entrust with the earth. Okay, so he says we will paint a clear picture of how God's spiritual kingdom government is operative in the church. That's what basically this whole book is about, really, is to show that Jesus came as king to raise up a kingdom community, and is to show that the worldly government is not God's approved government for the earth. The church is his approved agency, government agency on earth to fulfill his will.